part of the Merze Tate Traveling Club.
This is a Leah reporter reporting at Western Michigan University.
We are at High School in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Hi, I'm Tori Zachary, and I'm at Video 3. Nice to meet you.
I'm the archivist of the Afro-American newspaper.
I am right in front of the National Archives, and I'm going to go inside and learn about Merze Tate and her records in the State Department.
Well, welcome Merze Tate Travel Club and Miss Hollins visiting the Moreland Spring Garden Research Center to look at the Merze Tate collection.
My grandfather and her father were brothers, so she would be a second cousin to me. I had a great grandfather that was an abolitionist. As the slaves crossed the river and came into Ohio from West Virginia, in Mount Pleasant, Ohio, they had a place that they would hide slaves in the attic of their home and overnight. And from the story that I've read a little bit about, they would bring the slave in on a horse, and they would carry him upstairs into the house, and they had a ladder that they would take, and he would climb up into the attic. Then they would take the ladder back outside and they would wash it down with bleach or something like that, so if they was following with hounds that they couldn't detect it. Then the next morning slave would get back on the horse, never touch the ground, and move on.
Wow.
So they were some of the first settlers to come in this area.
The black settlers.
Black settlers.
The Tates originally came from the East Coast and through Pennsylvania and then into Ohio. And then her great-grandfather came to Michigan with another group of black settlers, and they settled in these woods out near where she was born. It was just to the north and east of there. They homesteaded. There was a whole group of family names which are now called the Old Settlers, original Old Settlers. And they settled in that land and homesteaded. Her parents didn't live together. She lived in the house that she grew up with her mother, and her father lived on the next farm. They didn't get along real well, and so they each did their own thing. I can remember her father because he had one leg. He had one leg off. And I can remember he used to drive an old Model A Ford Coupe.
Merze had older brothers, half-brothers and sisters, and one of her older sisters, Thelma Cross, encouraged her for education too.
This is the original structure, but if it didn't have the porch, it would be exactly like it was when Merze Tate was there. Yeah.
Merze Tate came to Battle Creek Central in 1921 after her school burnt down in Blanchard.
Library in Battle Creek, Michigan, looking up some very good information on Merze Tate. And I just found this news article dated on October 11th, 1953. And it goes, few graduates of Battle Creek High School have attained greater heights in the field of education than Dr. Merze Tate. Then she entered Western Michigan College, where she won her BA degree. And Miss Tate also holds degrees from Columbia, Oxford, and Harvard universities. And this is just some of the news articles about Merze Tate.
She won the Hinman Oratorical Contest in 11th grade. She graduated in 1922 with all A's.
This is a Leah reporter reporting at Western Michigan University from the very first hall, East Hall, which was established in 1904. This was the very first university that Merze Tate studied at.
Right now this looks like a library, and it is a library and an archive, and we have some of Dr. Tate's papers here, but at the time she was a student at Western. It would have been known as Western State Teachers College, and this would have been the gym. And I'm sure she probably had gym classes in this building and had other classes in this building too. There were African Americans at Western going back. The very first person who gets a teaching certificate is a woman named Merze Shepard, and she got a teaching certificate from Western in 1908, and she came from a little bit north of Kalamazoo, a little area known as Cooper and Cooper Township. Although at that point when Merze Tate was here, there were probably, not a lot of African Americans. In the 20s, we probably had maybe around 1,000 students, maybe, a little more, a little less. And I would probably guess that we would have had probably fewer than 20 or 25 students that would have been African American. She left a legacy of a student who faced challenges and overcame a lot of obstacles to really excel in her field. As an African American, she certainly faced many, many challenges. As a woman, she also left a tremendous legacy to Western that she went on. She became a figure in higher education. She became a professor. In those days, the number of women who rose through the academic ranks, and especially at some of the institutions she was associated with, were few and far between. It's not surprising that she never married. I think, she needed to focus on her career. She left a couple of really tangible things to Western. She left some of her estate to Western, and there's a Merze Tate Center over in the College of Education. I am probably more impressed with the papers she left, though. That's just a personal bias, and it's not nearly as many papers as I would like, but it's a pretty nice record of some of her travels, some of the relationships she maintained with her colleagues and her students for many, many years, and a good record of her accomplishments.
It was constructed according to the will of the Ku Klux Klan, because they did not want African American students and white students to go to school together. And we had a very, very distinguished faculty here. Many of our teachers had masters and PhDs, and we were able to get a very, very a solid and a firm education here at Addis High School.
I'm Floribel Bryant, and I'm looking at the picture of my grandmother's brother, Matthias Noel Cox. He was the principal who selected very, very outstanding people to be teachers here. Uncle Math had a master's degree from Harvard University in 1926, and then later he went to England and studied at Oxford University. The quality of the teachers was awesome. And the teachers made the students feel that we were us. Now sometimes I go to those same schools and the teachers talk about them children, or we are faculty and it's those children. When I was here, we were us. They knew my family, but also they treated the students here as though they were a part of a loving community. So there was this profound, palpable sense of caring that all of the teachers had.
It's the book that I wrote about the history of the school, and it's pretty popular, and I wrote it because I thought that the history was slipping away from us. And we had a good deal of controversy about the school because they tried to close the school initially because of the protests from the alumni. It was remained open as a junior high school, and now it is back to being a high school, a medical magnet high school, and we just graduated our first senior class in this past June.
My family history started with my mother. Her name was Elizabeth James, and she graduated in 1939. My older brother Michael attended Crispus Attucks. My sister Diane attended Crispus Attucks, and my younger brother James Brown. We all went to Crispus Attucks, and on the other side, my brother married a young lady from Crispus Attucks, my sister-in-law Glenna Brown, and so everybody that I knew that lived in the vicinity went to Crispus Attucks. There was no other school for us, although if you lived in another area, I guess they did go to other schools. But in Indianapolis, they were just starting to open the doors, and so it made it easier for young black children to go to other schools because they lived all over. But many of them still continued to come to Crispus Attucks because we were represented better here. When we came here, if you went to this school, then whatever activities that they had, you could be in it. You could be a president of one of the clubs here or whatever. And at the other schools, that was not the case. The black children they may have been able to participate in organizations, but they certainly were not the leadership in those organizations. And here at Crispus Attucks, we were the leaders.
One of the things that I learned today about Ms. Merze Tate was that she enjoyed travel and carried her camera with her everywhere. And I think my love for travel came from attending Crispus Attucks. My teachers every fall when we returned from summer vacation taught about their experiences and their travels. My lifelong love for travel and experiences, I think, came from my attending Crispus Attucks High School. It's just kind of a funny thing that a school where she taught, that one of the legacies that this school and its staff have left for its student body is that love and that thirst for knowledge, that thirst to see those things that you read about. That's one of the reasons why I travel, and I've been able to go to places that as a student here at Attucks, I read about the Colosseums in Rome. I read about the Eiffel Towers and those kinds of places, and that all began at Crispus Attucks. And I'm proud to be able to say that I've been able to travel to all those kinds of places, and I think that she would be very pleased to know that that's one of the legacies that she and others like her left for the students here at Crispus Attucks.
Mr. Smith will be discussing the history of Oxford and what life may have been like for Merze Tate. Okay, so who are some of the most famous graduates or professors from Oxford?
Oxford has been very famous for producing world leaders, political leaders. Bill Clinton's daughter, she too, following in her father's footsteps, came and spent a year in Oxford doing a master's degree. Something was started which was called the Association for the Education of Women at Oxford University, and this meant that they were able to attend courses and go to lectures at the university, but they weren't yet full members of the university and they weren't able to receive degrees. And so it went on, and Annie Rogers was one of the first of these. And out of that grew an institution called the Society of Oxford Home Students, which was for women who wanted to study at Oxford, and they would be living either in their parents' home or in some kind of lodgings. And that was the institution that eventually became St Anne's College. This long campaign went on right from 1878 until 1920, that's 50 years, with Annie Rogers very much a leader of it, along with a lady called Bertha Johnson, who was the first principal of the Society of Home Students, trying gently and very tactfully to negotiate with the men of the university for women to be admitted to full membership. And finally, they won this long-drawn battle in 1920, and the first women were allowed to take their degrees.
Okay, so can you tell us in today, what is the ratio between men and women who go to Oxford?
Yes, I think it's almost exactly 50-50.
So what do you think it would have been like for Merze Tate to go to Oxford since she was there in the mid-30s? 1930s.
Yeah. Well, the first thing you have to understand is that Merze Tate had already taken 2 degrees in American institutions. She'd done her BA at what became Western Michigan University. So she was actually coming to Oxford at the age, I think, of about 28 or 29, and she came in order to do graduate work. So it's very different from going to college for the first time, when you're very much taught in classes and very much directed in your studies. Graduate work on the whole is much more you're left to yourself. So she would be there. She lived in a number of houses around North Oxford. And I'm going to attempt to show you some pictures by holding up pictures from a book up to the camera. I'm not quite sure how well this will work. But I know from our records that Merze lived in a house in a road called Bradmore Road. Now you have to understand that in these early days of St Anne's College, there were no college buildings at all. It was all home students. They were all living in ordinary residential houses that were run normally by a warden. And in that house there would be, let us say, 15 or 16 or 20 students living in rooms, and they would all have their meals together, cooked by the warden of the house. And all the houses that Merze Tate actually lived in were houses in what's called North Oxford, which is a suburb that was built mostly in the 19th century, at the time when Oxford professors were for the first time allowed to marry. It used to be not allowed before that time. So a lot of these very grand houses were built very quickly to house Oxford dons, and some of them became used as residences for students as well. So yes, she would attend lectures, she would have crucial meetings with her supervisor. Because she was doing, as I've said, a graduate degree, her work would be guided by a very eminent professor who was her supervisor. And in her case, this was an interesting man called Professor Alfred Zimmern. He wasn't, obviously, being male, he wasn't part of the Society of Oxford Home Students. He was a fellow of another college, and he was a professor. He was the first professor of international relations at the University of Oxford. So Merze would have gone to some other college for her meetings with Alfred Zimmern. He would be guiding her, but a lot of her work would have had to be quite solitary. She would use libraries, or she would sit in her room in Bradmore Road and work away at what became the thesis which got her a graduate degree, which was called Bachelor of Letters, B.Lit.
I know that in America, at the time that Merze Tate was going to school, it was kind of like segregated. In Oxford, was it really like that? Did it really matter if she was African American or not? Yeah.
That's a very intelligent question, and actually I was coming to that, because the interesting thing is that though Oxford, as I've said, was segregated on gender, it has never been segregated on race, and neither has any other British university, as far as I'm aware. And one of the other questions I was told to expect was, why did it not seem to be a particularly big deal that Oxford had this first ever African-American woman student? And I think the answer to that is simply that race was not such an issue at Oxford. In fact, I mean, clearly it is true that Merze was the first African-American, but there would already have been quite a lot of non-white students at Oxford University, partly because of the British Empire. Because Great Britain in the 19th century and the 18th century had colonies all over the world, particularly in the Far East, in India and what became Pakistan. Not in large numbers, but there certainly would have been a significant presence of non-white students at Oxford, right probably from the middle of the 19th century. So I think that's partly why nobody really talked about race when it came to Merze Tate.
I'm John Gartrell. I'm the archivist of the Afro-American newspaper. Been here since 2008, and welcome here in Baltimore City. This is actually our third location. We're on 2519 North Charles Street, where Miss Tate would have been a writer, would have been 628 Utah Street. This here is a photograph, or a picture of our founder, John H. Murphy Sr., who was born here in Baltimore City and founded the newspaper in 1892. So we're actually in our 118th year of continuous publication as of 2010. So this picture here is actually a photograph of John Murphy and 5 of his sons. So he actually had 10 children. So 5 boys, 5 girls, and they all work for the paper in some form or fashion. So John Murphy is sort of seated here in the middle, and the gentleman in the back with the bow tie on the last row here is Carl Murphy. So he took over the paper after his father passed away in 1922, and he was editor-in-chief from 22 to 67 when he passed away. So he would have been the gentleman in charge of the editorial staff when Miss Tate would have been writing for the paper. Okay. Miss Tate would have been writing at the previous location on Utah Street, and over time these books would have been at the Utah Street location, then moved to Bowie, and now they're here. So you see some of the dates from the 1920s. We've got volumes through the 30s, and they reflect the different editions. So you'll see the different names: the National, Washington, Lake City, which would have been Baltimore. So just examples of how wide the newspaper actually was. So at one point we printed 12 different editions. It came out twice in Baltimore City, twice in Washington, and then National, Richmond, Philadelphia, Newark, New Jersey, all up and down the East Coast, as well as nationally and internationally. What you'll find in the paper is they reported weekly about news from other places. So you'll see one section will be Philadelphia news or Carolina news or Richmond news. So it was definitely one way that families could even keep in contact. If there was a popular minister coming to town for a revival, you say, oh, okay, Minister so-and-so is going to be in Baltimore this week. And I actually met a gentleman who grew up in South Carolina, and he read the Afro. So it just showed that, it wasn't just relegated to people who lived in Baltimore and D.C., but people up and down the East Coast, right? And you knew, this is your lifeline. It's basically your, it's your social network for all intents and purposes. So
welcome Merze Tate Travel Club and Miss Hollins visiting the Moreland Spring Garden Research Center to look at the Merze Tate collection, which is currently being processed. It is roughly about 25 of our document boxes, and you're going to have an example of what they look like, so you'll see a very small scintilla, a very small representation of what's being held in the collection of Dr. Merze Tate. So we go here. This is a cross-section and an example of correspondence. Ultimately, all correspondence will be listed alphabetically. As you see, there's a letter A. And this is a very small example of the kinds of letters that Dr. Tate received over the course of her life, usually thanking her for her donations, for being rather charitable as a philanthropist, celebrating her birthday with her sorority sisters, as well as her brothers and sisters, as well as her professional things. Your manuscript has reached me. Thank you very much for your work on New Zealand and the Pacific Antarctic. So she was just a very prolific writer and a very erudite scholar. Now we can go over here and see an example of some of the artifacts, as well as some of the movie footage. As Ms. Hollins has pointed out to me in her work, she was given gifts from various places. I believe these are either East Indian and or some level of Asian. Sterling silver, by the way. Hair clips. And I think we have another artifact here. Now these are also sterling silver, and I'm not sure if that's iron, but it looks kind of Hindu. I know that I've seen this kind of deity before in East Indian culture, and I think that these were earrings. Okay, one earring's missing here, but this is apparently a brooch and a set of earrings that she received. Once again, sterling silver. Hopefully you'll follow in the footsteps of women who were not as well recognized as they should have been, but still left their mark on society.
I'm right in front of the National Archives, and I'm going to go inside and learn about Merze Tate and her records in the State Department.
5 minutes. At this time, we ask that you end all copying and return all records and materials. We will reopen Monday at 9 a.m.
There just has got to be a book written about Ms. Tate, because I have learned so much today with through your visit here, and I thank you for coming and bringing to our attention such a worthy person to have our knowledge of, and it's going to make me go back to the computer this evening and start looking up and researching more about Ms. Tate.
I found in a very dusty attic that there is one more really rather special thing, and I'd like to show you it. She obviously sent to the Mrs. Butler, I should say there were two sisters who were called Ruth Butler and Violet Butler, who were tutors at the Society for Home Students, and who would have been the people who looked after Merze's welfare rather than directly teaching her during her time. And as a gesture of gratitude to Ruth and Violet Butler, Merze sent them in 1941 the commencement programme for the ceremony at Radcliffe where she received her doctorate. Now, in Merze's own handwriting, we have her message of thanks to Ruth and Violet Butler.
Many thanks.
Many thanks.
For all that you did.
For all that you did.
To make this day possible.
That's it.
Signed Merze Tate. Cool.
I was very excited when I discovered that, especially as it's actually in Merze's own handwriting.
That is actually wonderful. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for sharing that a lot.
We appreciate
that.
She came from, rural beginnings, and when you think, though, of what she accomplished in her lifetime, and she became a world traveler, a recognized scholar, historian, author, and I think there's something in it for everybody, because she came from rural Michigan. She was African American. She was a female, and if somebody like Merze Tate can do it, then I think all of us can learn by her example.
Every year at our family reunion in August, I'd drive her back and forth, and we'd go, and she'd tell me stories about when she was in Europe, and she was there. One story was when Hitler was doing all his starting of the war. She was in the Colosseum hearing him rant and rave and carry on. It was very interesting, some of the stories, and one real thing I remember is that all her stories and anecdotes in the car with me would last about 15 or 20 minutes, and I got to figure that was about a class time lecture, that she would do in class. I remember that when we'd have a little problem or something about school, and it'd always come up in the family that, well, if Merze could do it, you could do it. Merze went through this and went through that.